For most of my life, I believed sleep was simply what happened when my body needed rest. Close your eyes, drift into unconsciousness, wake up refreshed. A biological necessity, nothing more. But what I discovered 3 months ago shattered that simple understanding completely. Sleep isn't rest. It's a journey. A nightly migration of consciousness to places that exist beyond the boundaries of our physical reality. And what's most disturbing is that we were never supposed to remember where we go. Until something changed. Until they decided it was time we knew the truth. My name is Dr. Sarah Chen, and I'm a sleep researcher at the Northern California Institute of Neuroscience. For 15 years, I've studied brain wave patterns, REM cycles, and sleep disorders. I thought I understood the mechanics of sleep better than most people on Earth. But understanding the mechanics of something and understanding its true purpose are two completely different things. It's like studying the engineering of a spacecraft without realizing it's actually designed for interstellar travel. 3 months ago, I began experiencing something that shouldn't be possible. Vivid, continuous memories of my sleep experiences. Not dreams. Dreams are fragmented, symbolic, often nonsensical. What I was experiencing had narrative coherence, physical sensation, and most importantly, consistency. Night after night, I was going to the same place, meeting the same beings, learning information that I shouldn't know, but could verify when I woke up. At first, I documented it as a fascinating sleep anomaly. Detailed journals of each experience. But then the information I was receiving during sleep started proving accurate in waking life. Predictions about research outcomes. Solutions to problems I hadn't consciously solved. Knowledge about colleagues' private situations that I had no way of knowing. That's when I realized this wasn't happening inside my mind. I was actually going somewhere. And someone wanted me to remember. The night everything changed started like dozens before it. I went to bed at 10:47 p.m., my usual time. My husband Michael already asleep beside me, our golden retriever Luna curled at the foot of the bed. Nothing unusual. Nothing to indicate that this would be the night I would finally meet him. The being who would explain what sleep really is. And why humanity's understanding of it has been deliberately limited for thousands of years. If you want to understand what I'm about to share, what I was shown about the true nature of sleep and consciousness, subscribe to this channel and turn on notifications. Because what you're about to hear will change how you think about the 8 hours you spend unconscious every single night. This isn't speculation or theory. This is direct knowledge from beings who have been observing humanity's sleep patterns since before we had written language. Dr. Sarah Chen, 42 years old, published researcher with 17 peer-reviewed papers on sleep architecture, lay in her bed staring at the ceiling at 11:30 p.m. Sleep wouldn't come. Not because of insomnia. She didn't suffer from sleep disorders despite studying them professionally. But because of anticipation. For the past 6 weeks, every single night when she fell asleep, she experienced something she couldn't explain within her scientific framework. A transition. Sudden and complete. One moment lying in bed, consciousness fading. The next moment standing in a vast crystalline chamber filled with soft blue-white light. Full sensory experience. The cool smooth floor beneath bare feet. The subtle vibration of energy in the air. And most remarkably, the presence of others. Dozens of humans, hundreds perhaps, all seemingly asleep somewhere on Earth, but present here in this impossible space. The first few times it happened, Sarah had dismissed it as an unusually vivid lucid dream. She'd experienced lucid dreaming before, the awareness that you're dreaming while still in the dream. But this was qualitatively different. In lucid dreams, you could manipulate the environment, change things with thought. Here, the environment remained fixed, solid, real. You couldn't change it any more than you could change a physical room by wishing it different. And the people. In dreams, people are usually distorted, inconsistent, projections of your subconscious. But here, each person maintained perfect consistency. The same individuals night after night. Some she'd started recognizing. A young man with distinctive red hair who seemed confused each time he arrived. An elderly woman who moved with peaceful certainty, clearly understanding something the others didn't. A teenage girl who spent each session asking questions to beings Sarah couldn't yet perceive. Sarah had started keeping detailed records. Descriptions of each person she encountered. The layout of the chamber. The quality of light. The emotional texture of the space. And most importantly, the growing certainty that this wasn't happening in her brain. This was somewhere else. Somewhere real. Tonight, as she lay waiting for sleep, Sarah had made a decision. If this happened again, when it happened again, she would stop observing passively. She would demand answers. Her scientific training had taught her to gather data patiently, but her scientific training had also taught her that unexplained phenomena demanded investigation, not passive acceptance. Sleep came gradually. The familiar sensation of consciousness loosening its grip on sensory input. The drift into hypnagogic imagery. And then the transition. Not gradual but instantaneous. One moment in bed. Next moment standing in the crystalline chamber. Fully alert, fully present. The chamber was larger than she'd initially realized. The first few times, she'd stayed near where she arrived, overwhelmed by the impossibility of it. But tonight she moved deeper into the space. The walls weren't walls exactly, more like boundaries of light, curved surfaces that seemed to extend infinitely upward. The floor felt solid but glowed with internal luminescence. Other people appeared around her. The red-haired young man, looking startled as always. The elderly woman, who nodded to Sarah with recognition. And dozens of others, some appearing confused, others calm. A few seeming completely unaware they were anywhere unusual at all. Sarah approached the elderly woman who seemed to understand what was happening. "Excuse me, do you know where we are?" The woman smiled gently. "You're beginning to remember. That's good. That's why you're perceiving this place more clearly now." "Remember what? I've never been here before these past weeks." "You've been here every night of your life, dear. You just weren't allowed to remember. None of us were. But something has changed. The protocols are shifting." Before Sarah could ask what protocols, the atmosphere in the chamber changed. A presence arrived. Not walking in, but materializing. Condensing from the ambient light into solid form. The being stood approximately 7 feet tall. Humanoid in basic structure but clearly not human. Skin that seemed to shift between pearl white and pale blue, as if made of living opal. Eyes larger than human proportions, entirely dark, but not threatening, more like windows into deep space. The being moved with fluid grace, each gesture deliberate and purposeful. Sarah's scientific mind catalogued details automatically even as her emotional mind processed the fundamental impossibility. This was not a dream projection. This was an entity with independent existence and clear intelligence. The being's voice came telepathically, imprinted directly on consciousness without passing through auditory processing. A gender-neutral tone, clinically precise yet not cold. "Dr. Sarah Chen. Your persistent observation and documentation have been noted. Your scientific framework has begun creating questions that require answers. I am Kyleth, coordinator of human consciousness migration for this planetary sector. You have been selected to receive information about sleep's true function because you possess both the intellectual framework to understand it and the communication skills to share it with others." Sarah's rational mind wanted to reject this as elaborate hallucination. But she forced herself into researcher mode. Gather data. Ask questions. Test consistency. Where is this place? What is this chamber? Kyleth gestured to the surrounding space. This is a transition station. A dimensional interface where human consciousness during sleep can safely separate from physical embodiment and begin its nightly journey. You call this process falling asleep. But the accurate description is dimensional translation. Your consciousness leaves the third-dimensional physical plane and travels to other frequencies of reality. That's impossible. Brain imaging shows consciousness is generated by neural activity. When we sleep, that activity changes but remains localized to the physical brain. Your brain imaging detects the anchor point, the residual signal that maintains the connection between traveling consciousness and physical body. But it does not detect consciousness itself because consciousness is non-local. It exists independent of physical substrate. Your brain is a receiving and transmitting device, not the source of consciousness. Sarah processed this. It contradicted everything her field assumed as foundational. If what you're saying is true, why don't we remember? Why does sleep feel like unconsciousness? Intentional design. A protection protocol established 7,000 years ago when humanity reached a critical population threshold. Before that, humans remembered their nightly journeys naturally. Ancient texts refer to this as dream temples, astral travel, walking between worlds. But as populations grew and human consciousness became more collectively interconnected, unrestricted memory of dimensional travel created psychological instability. Humans would confuse which reality was primary, which life was the waking one. So the Galactic Council implemented memory suppression protocols. You still travel every night. You simply don't remember the journey. And now? Why am I remembering now? Kailetha's expression, if the subtle shifts in luminescence could be called expression, conveyed something like satisfaction. Because humanity has reached another threshold. In the next 20 years, your species will face challenges that require expanded consciousness to navigate successfully. Climate collapse, technological singularity, potential contact with other civilizations. Facing these challenges with consciousness limited to third-dimensional awareness would result in catastrophic failure. So the Council has authorized gradual removal of memory suppression protocols. Starting with individuals like you who can process the information and communicate it effectively. Sarah felt her scientific framework simultaneously shattering and expanding. So every human travels somewhere during sleep? Every night? Every sentient being across the galaxy. Sleep is universal among biological consciousness because dimensional translation is how consciousness maintains itself. Your physical body rests. Yes. Repairs cellular damage, consolidates memory, regulates hormones. But consciousness doesn't rest. It travels. It learns. It connects with its larger existence beyond physical limitation. Larger existence? What does that mean? Kyleth gestured, and the chamber's walls became transparent. Sarah could see outward into a vast landscape that defied conventional physics. Multiple levels of reality stacked like translucent planes, each with different properties, different laws. Some looked almost physical, cities of light, natural landscapes of impossible beauty. Others were pure geometric abstraction, patterns of light and sound. Still others were so alien in configuration that Sarah's mind struggled to process them. Your consciousness during sleep journeys through these dimensional frequencies. Each night follows a pattern, though most humans don't remember it. First, you arrive here, in the transition station. Your consciousness separates from physical embodiment and adjusts to non-physical perception. Then you proceed to your designated frequency level. Designated by whom? By your own consciousness development level. Think of dimensional frequencies like grades in school. You don't skip from first grade to university. You progress naturally based on your capacity to understand increasingly complex information. Some humans spend their sleep time in what you might call rest frequencies, beautiful peaceful environments where consciousness simply exists without agenda. Others travel to learning frequencies where advanced knowledge is downloaded directly into consciousness. And some, those most developed, travel to service frequencies where they actively participate in maintaining cosmic balance. Sarah's mind raced through implications. So we're learning things during sleep? Is that why we sometimes wake up with solutions to problems we couldn't solve consciously? Precisely. Your conscious mind works within limitations of linear time and physical logic. Your consciousness during sleep accesses non-linear information. You can perceive problems from multiple angles simultaneously, access collective knowledge pools, even communicate with versions of yourself in parallel timelines. Solutions that seem impossible from third-dimensional perspective become obvious from expanded awareness. When you wake, you don't remember the dimensional journey, but the information downloads into your subconscious and emerges as intuition or sudden insight. Kyleth directed Sarah's attention to different groups of sleeping humans in the chamber. Observe. That cluster of individuals is preparing to travel to a learning frequency focused on advanced mathematics. They are scientists and engineers in waking life. During sleep, they access mathematical principles that haven't been discovered yet in third-dimensional reality. When they wake, they won't remember the equations explicitly, but their research will unconsciously move in directions that align with what they learned. Sarah saw the group, about 15 people ranging from young adults to elderly, begin to shimmer and fade, their consciousness forms dissolving into streams of light that flowed upward through the chamber ceiling toward higher frequencies. And that individual, Kyleth indicated the red-haired young man Sarah had noticed before, is stuck in confusion because his conscious mind is fighting the process. His newly remembering his sleep journeys and his rational mind insists it's impossible. So he arrives here each night but refuses to proceed further. He stands in the transition station arguing with himself until his body's sleep cycle completes and is pulled back to physical reality. He wastes his sleep potential. What should he do? Accept. Surrender the need to understand everything through conscious rational framework. Trust that consciousness has access to information the conscious mind doesn't. But this is the great challenge for your species currently. You've developed rational scientific thinking, which serves certain purposes beautifully. But you've become trapped in it. You dismiss anything that doesn't fit materialist paradigm as impossible or imaginary. So you reject your own direct experience of dimensional travel. You experience it every night but call it just dreams and ignore it. Sarah recognized her own pattern in that description. How many nights had she woken up with vivid memories that she'd immediately dismissed as meaningless dreams? How much information had she rejected because it didn't fit her scientific worldview? Tell me about the different frequencies. Where do people go specifically? Kyleth created a visual representation, a kind of dimensional map that appeared in the air between them. The reality structure consists of 12 primary frequency levels beyond your third-dimensional physical plane. Each serves different functions. Fourth frequency, the closest to physical reality. This is where most humans spend their sleep time initially. It's the realm you call dreams. But fourth frequency isn't random imagination. It's a processing level where your consciousness sorts through emotional experiences, resolves psychological conflicts, integrates learning. The bizarre quality of dreams comes from fourth frequency's different relationship with time and logic. Multiple scenarios can be explored simultaneously. Symbolic representation replaces literal narrative. Your consciousness uses this frequency to solve problems that logic alone cannot address. Fifth frequency, the learning temples. Vast repositories of knowledge organized by subject and accessible to consciousness that has learned to navigate beyond fourth frequency. Want to learn advanced physics? There's a temple for that. Ancient history? Temples containing actual recorded experiences from those who lived it. Artistic technique? Temples where consciousness can practice skills that transfer to physical ability. Most creative breakthroughs in human history originated from information accessed during sleep in fifth frequency temples. Sixth frequency, collective consciousness pools. Here individual consciousness merges temporarily with larger group consciousness. You might join the collective awareness of all humans currently alive, experiencing the species as a single entity, or connect with consciousness of other species, animals, plants, even planetary consciousness itself. This is where empathy and intuitive understanding of others originates. When you wake up somehow knowing how someone else feels, you likely connected with them in sixth frequency during sleep. Seventh frequency, timeline access. This is where it becomes truly mind-bending from third-dimensional perspective. Seventh frequency allows consciousness to perceive multiple timeline variations simultaneously. Every choice creates branching timelines. Seventh frequency lets you explore roads not taken, probable futures, alternative pasts. Advanced souls use seventh frequency to make course corrections, perceiving which timeline leads to optimal development and then subtly adjusting choices in waking life to navigate toward it. Sarah interrupted. Wait, are you saying we can actually change our future based on what we perceive during sleep? You already do this constantly. You simply don't remember doing it consciously. Have you ever had a powerful feeling that you should or shouldn't do something, with no logical reason? That's your consciousness remembering timeline navigation from seventh frequency. You perceive that certain choice leads to negative outcome, so upon waking, you feel inexplicable aversion to that choice. Humans call this gut feeling or premonition. It's actually memory of timeline exploration during sleep. 8th through 10th frequencies, service levels. Here consciousness participates actively in maintaining cosmic order. Healing work, energy balancing, assisting souls in transition from physical to non-physical existence. Some humans spend their entire sleep time every night doing service work in these frequencies. They wake up exhausted, feeling like they didn't rest, because their consciousness was highly active. But they're performing essential cosmic function. 11th frequency, communion with higher intelligence. Direct communication with beings far more advanced than humans. This is where genuine spiritual experience originates. Those moments of transcendent unity, profound love, cosmic understanding that some people experience and call mystical. Usually these are memories bleeding through from 11th frequency contact during sleep. 12th frequency, source connection. Direct experience of the fundamental consciousness that generates all reality. Very few humans access this frequency during sleep. Those who do often return to physical life transformed. They've experienced their identity as infinite consciousness temporarily wearing human form. These individuals become your mystics, your enlightened teachers, your saints. Because they've directly remembered what everyone forgets. That you are not small limited beings having occasional spiritual experiences. You are infinite consciousness having a temporary physical experience. Sarah absorbed this cosmic geography, her mind cataloging questions faster than she could articulate them. But one question seemed most urgent. You said memory suppression was implemented 7,000 years ago. Why specifically then? What changed? Kyletha's presence seemed to intensify slightly, a signal Sarah was beginning to recognize as indicating important information. 7,000 years ago, human population reached approximately 5 million individuals. At that threshold, something emerged that hadn't existed before. Collective human consciousness began forming a unified field. Individual humans were no longer isolated consciousness units. You began affecting each other unconsciously through morphic resonance. This created an opportunity for accelerated evolution. Discoveries made by one human could ripple through the collective field and be accessed by others. This is why you see parallel invention throughout history. Multiple people discovering the same thing independently at the same time. They're accessing the same information from collective consciousness field. But it also created a danger. If millions of humans all remembered their dimensional travels during sleep, all those memories would feed into the collective field. And human consciousness at that development stage wasn't mature enough to handle it. Imagine trying to live your physical life while simultaneously remembering vivid experiences from 11 other dimensional frequencies. Which reality is primary? Which memories guide your choices? The psychological strain would be catastrophic. Early experiments were attempted. Mystery schools in ancient Egypt, Greece, India taught select individuals to maintain conscious memory during sleep travel. Some succeeded beautifully and became great teachers. But many went mad, unable to integrate multidimensional awareness with third-dimensional functioning. They would stop eating because food seemed irrelevant from higher frequency perspective. Stop sleeping because they got confused about which state was sleep and which was waking. Some would stand motionless for days, consciousness fragmented across multiple frequencies unable to reintegrate. So the Galactic Council, which oversees development of all sentient species, made a difficult decision. Implement memory suppression protocols for humans. You would still travel dimensionally during sleep. That can't be prevented, it's fundamental to how consciousness works. But you wouldn't remember the journeys. Sleep would seem like unconscious rest. Dreams would seem like random mental noise. And you could develop your rational conscious mind and physical civilization without the destabilizing influence of remembered dimensional travel. Sarah understood the logic but felt the loss. So humanity has been traveling to these incredible places, learning, growing, connecting with cosmic consciousness every single night for thousands of years, and we don't remember any of it. The information still transfers. You still learn and grow. You simply process it unconsciously. But yes, the direct experience is suppressed. And this has created a tragic side effect the Council didn't fully anticipate. What side effect? Humans have forgotten you are multidimensional beings. You've come to believe you are only physical bodies with consciousness somehow generated by brain chemistry. You've lost connection with your spiritual nature, your cosmic identity, your purpose beyond physical survival. And this forgetting has created the existential emptiness that plagues modern humanity. You feel incomplete because you are incomplete. You're only conscious of 1/12 of your existence. Kyleth gestured again, and Sarah could see Earth suspended in space, but overlaid with a network of light, the collective human consciousness field. Parts of it glowed brightly. Other areas looked dim, almost gray. This is real-time representation of human collective consciousness. The bright areas are populations that maintain some connection to dimensional awareness. Indigenous cultures, contemplative traditions, individuals who naturally remember fragments of sleep travel. The gray areas are populations completely disconnected from multidimensional nature. Modern urban civilization, technological societies where materialism is the dominant worldview. And look at the correlation. The image shifted, overlaying different data. The gray areas, where dimensional awareness is lowest, show highest rates of depression, suicide, addiction, violence. Because humans in these regions feel profoundly disconnected from meaning. They sense something is missing but don't know what. So they try to fill the void with consumption, entertainment, substances, anything to ease the ache of existential incompleteness. While bright areas, where dimensional awareness remains stronger, show measurably higher life satisfaction, stronger community bonds, lower violence, more sustainable relationship with environment. Because people there still sense they're part of something larger than physical existence, even if they don't consciously remember their nightly dimensional travels. Sarah saw the pattern with disturbing clarity. Her own field of sleep research, obsessed with brain chemistry and neural patterns, completely missed that sleep was a spiritual practice. A nightly journey into expanded consciousness. And modern sleep science treated it as mere biological maintenance. So why remove the suppression now? What's changed? Multiple factors converging. First, human population has reached 8 billion. The collective consciousness field is now strong enough and mature enough to handle gradual reintroduction of dimensional awareness without mass psychological breakdown. Second, you're approaching technological singularity, artificial intelligence that may exceed human intelligence. Navigating that transition requires wisdom beyond rational thought. You need access to higher dimensional guidance. Third, environmental collapse forces humanity to either transcend current consciousness level or face extinction. You cannot solve problems from the same consciousness that created them. You need dimensional upgrade. And fourth, most importantly, the Council has observed that memory suppression has created more problems than it solved. Yes, it prevented psychological fragmentation 7,000 years ago. But it also created spiritually empty civilization racing towards self-destruction. The experiment in protected development has run its course. Time to trust humanity with the truth about sleep's real nature. Sarah felt the weight of cosmic purpose settling onto her shoulders. So you're telling me this because I'm supposed to teach people about this? How? I'm a sleep researcher. If I publish a paper claiming consciousness leaves the body during sleep and travels to other dimensions, I'll be laughed out of my profession. Kyletha's response felt almost amused. You won't convince anyone through academic papers. Materialist science has too much invested in brain-generated consciousness model. Direct experience is the only teacher that works. You will teach people how to maintain conscious awareness during sleep travel. How to remember where they go. How to access the learning and healing available in dimensional frequencies. Experimental knowledge, not theoretical. How do I teach that when I'm only beginning to remember myself? I will show you the mechanics. Then you practice until it becomes natural. Then you teach others. This is how dimensional awareness spreads, one awakened individual teaching others through direct transmission, not through belief systems or intellectual frameworks. Kyleth moved closer, and Sarah felt energy shift around them. The key is understanding sleep's actual structure. What you currently perceive as single undifferentiated state of unconsciousness is actually a precise sequence of dimensional transitions occurring in 90-minute cycles throughout the night. A visual representation appeared, a diagram of sleep cycles Sarah recognized from her own research, but now annotated with information that wasn't in any textbook. Stage 1. Transition. Consciousness begins loosening attachment to physical sensory input. Brain waves slow from beta to alpha. This is the doorway period. With practice, you can maintain conscious awareness through this transition instead of losing consciousness. The key is relaxing body completely while keeping mind alert. Difficult balance, but achievable. Stage 2. Light sleep. Brain produces sleep spindles and K-complexes. From dimensional perspective, this is when consciousness fully separates from physical body and arrives here, in the transition station. Most humans lose conscious awareness during separation because it's been conditioned as automatic unconscious process. But you can learn to stay aware. Feel yourself lifting out of physical form. Perceive the transition station. Choose consciously which frequency you want to visit rather than being unconsciously directed. Stage 3 and 4, deep sleep, delta waves. From neuroscience perspective, this is when body performs physical restoration. But from dimensional perspective, this is when consciousness travels deepest into higher frequencies. The slower your brain waves, the higher the frequency your consciousness can access. Delta wave sleep is actually portal to 10th, 11th, sometimes 12th frequency. You're traveling to realms of profound spiritual contact. But without conscious awareness, you don't remember any of it. REM sleep, rapid eye movement, vivid dreams. Your science knows this is when most memorable dreams occur. But from dimensional perspective, REM is consciousness returning from higher frequencies back toward 4th frequency before re-entering physical body. Your eyes move rapidly because consciousness is processing multiple streams of dimensional information simultaneously. Your body is paralyzed because consciousness is still mostly non-physical. If body could move, it would act out dimensional experiences potentially causing injury. And this cycle repeats 4 to 6 times per night. Each cycle is an opportunity to travel, learn, heal, grow. But most humans waste these opportunities because they remain unconscious throughout the journey. Sarah interrupted with the practical question her scientific mind demanded. Okay, but specifically, how do I maintain awareness? What's the actual technique? Several methods work. I'll teach you 3 primary approaches. First method, the transition technique. As you're falling asleep, instead of letting consciousness fade, imagine you're climbing a rope. Feel yourself pulling upward hand over hand while your body remains still. This creates a split in awareness. Body consciousness releases into sleep while mind consciousness remains alert. With practice, you'll feel the actual moment of separation. Sudden shift from being in your physical body to hovering slightly above it, still connected but distinct. From there, you can consciously navigate to transition station. Second method, the anchor technique. Throughout the day, frequently ask yourself, am I dreaming? Really question it. Look for inconsistencies that indicate dream state. This builds a habit of awareness that carries into sleep. Eventually, you'll ask the question while actually dreaming and realize, yes, I am dreaming. That moment of realization triggers lucid awareness. From lucid dreaming, you can then intentionally shift from 4th frequency dream space into conscious travel to higher frequencies. Third method, the intention technique. Before sleep, clearly state your intention. Tonight I will consciously remember my dimensional travel. I will maintain awareness as I transition from physical to non-physical. I will remember where I go and what I learn. Repeat this intention until you fall asleep. Your consciousness will hear and respond. May not work immediately. Habitual unconsciousness is deeply conditioned. But consistent intention gradually rewrites the programming. And all 3 methods benefit from supporting practices. Meditation during waking hours trains mind to observe without attachment. Keeping dream journal strengthens dream recall, building bridge from unconscious to conscious memory. Avoiding heavy food before sleep reduces physical distraction during transition. Sleeping in complete darkness enhances pineal gland function, which regulates dimensional perception. Sarah was documenting everything mentally, already imagining research protocols. What happens when someone successfully maintains awareness? What's the actual experience? Want to find out directly? I can guide you through conscious transition right now. You're already here in the transition station. Most of your sleep cycle tonight has passed unconsciously as usual. But you have approximately 40 minutes of sleep time remaining. Enough for a brief conscious journey to fifth frequency learning temple. Would you like to experience it? Every scientific instinct in Sarah screamed yes. This was the ultimate data collection opportunity. Yes. Absolutely yes. What do I do? Simply follow me. And maintain awareness of the experience so you can remember it when you wake. The tendency will be to let it fade like a dream. Resist that tendency. Treat this as important memory you must retain. Kyleth began moving toward one of the chamber walls, and Sarah followed. As they approached, the wall dissolved into a corridor of light. Not metaphorical light, actual visible luminescence that formed a pathway extending upward at a 45-degree angle. We're ascending frequency now. Pay attention to how it feels. Sarah stepped into the corridor and immediately sensed the shift. A tingling sensation throughout her consciousness, as if her awareness itself was vibrating at a higher rate. The corridor seemed to extend infinitely, yet they reached the end within seconds. Time clearly operated differently here. They emerged into a space that Sarah's vocabulary struggled to describe. Imagine the most beautiful library you've ever seen. Then multiply its grandeur by 1,000. Then make it alive and responsive to thought. Vast halls extending in every direction. But walls weren't walls. They were flowing surfaces of liquid light. And instead of books, there were crystalline structures, each one containing condensed information accessible through consciousness. This is a learning temple. One of thousands in fifth frequency. This particular temple specializes in scientific and technological knowledge. Every discovery ever made, every principle ever understood, every innovation ever created is here. And available to any consciousness that can navigate to this frequency during sleep. Sarah saw other consciousness forms moving through the space. Some looked almost physical, humanoid in shape. Others were pure light. A few seemed to be geometric patterns or colors without any defined form. Who are all these beings? Some are human like you. Some are from other species, other planets. Learning temples are universal. Any consciousness seeking knowledge can access them. That form that looks like a rotating golden dodecahedron is a researcher from a silicon-based species in the Andromeda galaxy. Currently downloading information about organic chemistry because their species is attempting to create organic silicon hybrid life forms. Sarah approached one of the crystalline structures, drawn by intuition she couldn't explain. The crystal was approximately 2 feet tall, shaped like a double helix, glowing with soft green light. What is this? Knowledge about genetic engineering techniques that won't be discovered on Earth for another 70 years. But the information exists here now. Any human whose consciousness reaches this temple during sleep could access it. They'd wake up with intuitive understanding that would guide their research in revolutionary directions. Can I access it? Touch the crystal. Open your awareness. Let the information flow. Sarah reached out. Though she had no physical hands here, the intention created the equivalent. Her consciousness touched the crystal, and suddenly information flooded into her awareness. Not words or images, but direct understanding. She comprehended DNA manipulation techniques that were impossibly advanced by current scientific standards. Methods for correcting genetic disorders at the embryonic level. Techniques for extending human lifespan by regenerating telomeres. Formulas for triggering dormant genetic potentials encoded in human DNA but not currently expressed. The download lasted perhaps 10 seconds. When it concluded, Sarah stepped back, staggered by what she'd received. That's decades ahead of current genetic research. I understood it, but I don't have the language to explain it yet. It's like I downloaded an advanced textbook but haven't learned the vocabulary. Exactly. This is how dimensional learning works. Direct download of understanding into consciousness. When you wake, your conscious mind will begin developing language and frameworks to express what you learned. If you're a genetic researcher, you'd find yourself unconsciously designing experiments that align with this knowledge. Ideas would come that seem like your own intuition but are actually memories of what you learned here. Kyleth guided Sarah deeper into the temple. They passed through halls of mathematical knowledge, artistic technique, historical understanding, spiritual wisdom. Each area contained countless crystals, each one a repository of specific knowledge. Every creative breakthrough in human history originated from these temples. Einstein didn't figure out relativity purely through conscious calculation. His consciousness accessed this information during sleep. Mozart didn't consciously compose his symphonies. He downloaded them from the music temple in fifth frequency, then transcribed what he'd heard. Tesla claimed his inventions came to him fully formed in visions. He was remembering his nightly visits to the technology temple. So genius isn't about superior intellect, it's about accessing higher frequency information during sleep. Partially correct. Genius is the combination of conscious intellectual capacity plus unconscious access to dimensional knowledge plus ability to translate between frequencies. The most brilliant minds in history were people whose consciousness naturally traveled to learning temples during sleep and retained fragments of what they learned. They didn't know they were doing it consciously, but their consciousness knew how to bring information back across dimensional boundaries. Sarah understood with sudden clarity why some people had revolutionary insights that seemed to come from nowhere. They weren't coming from nowhere, they were coming from here, from the cosmic library of infinite knowledge accessible every night during sleep. Can everyone access these temples? Every human consciousness travels through fifth frequency at some point during sleep. But most pass through without stopping, without conscious engagement. They're directed to appropriate learning experiences based on their development level and life purpose, but it all happens automatically. What I'm teaching you is conscious access. Intentional navigation. Instead of unconsciously absorbing whatever learning your higher self directs you toward, you can consciously choose what to study. But there's a learning curve. First, you must achieve conscious awareness during sleep. Then you must learn to navigate dimensional frequencies intentionally. Then you must develop the discipline to retain memories across dimensional boundaries. The entire process might take months or years of practice. But once mastered, you have direct access to infinite knowledge every single night. Kyletha's presence shifted, taking on a more serious quality. But with this access comes responsibility. You must understand the protocols and dangers. Dangers? I thought you said dimensional travel during sleep was natural and safe. It is natural. It is not always safe when done consciously without proper training. Remember, memory suppression was implemented for a reason. Conscious multidimensional awareness can destabilize psyche if not approached gradually. The temple around them shifted, and Sarah saw a different scene. A human consciousness form, clearly disoriented, trying to absorb information from dozens of crystals simultaneously. The form began to fragment, pieces of consciousness scattering in different directions. Observe what happens when someone tries to learn too much too quickly. Consciousness can fragment across multiple frequencies. The person would wake up confused, unable to integrate different streams of knowledge. In severe cases, this manifests as dissociative disorders or psychotic breaks. They're not mentally ill, they're experiencing consciousness fragmentation from irresponsible dimensional navigation. The scene shifted again. Another consciousness form deliberately trying to access knowledge far beyond its development level. And this is attempted forced access to frequencies consciousness isn't ready for. Similar to trying to run graduate-level physics when you haven't learned basic mathematics. At best, the information is incomprehensible. At worst, it overwhelms consciousness, causing psychological damage. So there are rules. Natural laws, not arbitrary rules. First law, progress gradually. Don't try to jump from 4th frequency to 12th frequency in one night. Move step by step. Spend weeks or months becoming comfortable at each level before attempting higher frequencies. Second law, respect your development edge. If you encounter knowledge that feels overwhelming or incomprehensible, step back. You're not ready for it yet. Return to lower frequencies, integrate what you can understand, build capacity gradually. Third law, maintain balance. Don't neglect physical life in favor of dimensional exploration. You're incarnated in physical reality for a reason. Dimensional knowledge should enhance physical life, not replace it. Some seekers become so fascinated with higher frequencies they neglect relationships, health, practical responsibilities. This creates imbalance that ultimately prevents further spiritual growth. Fourth law, serve others. Knowledge from learning temples isn't for personal aggrandizement. It's meant to be shared in service to collective evolution. If you download advanced scientific information, use it to benefit humanity. If you access healing knowledge, help heal others. Hoarding dimensional knowledge for selfish purposes creates karmic resistance that blocks further access. Sarah absorbed these protocols seriously. And what about people who abuse this? What if someone uses dimensional knowledge for harmful purposes? Natural consequences prevent this more effectively than external punishment. Consciousness that acts harmfully generates disharmonic frequencies. Higher dimensional frequencies require harmonic resonance to access. Create discord through harmful action, and you automatically lock yourself out of higher frequencies. You can still access lower fourth frequency, where most humans operate unconsciously. But learning temples, service frequencies, source connection, all become inaccessible until you resolve the disharmony. Additionally, there are guardians. Beings like myself who monitor dimensional traffic and intervene if consciousness is accessing frequencies inappropriately. Not punishment, but gentle redirection. Similar to parent redirecting a child away from dangerous situation. We guide consciousness back to appropriate frequencies for their development level. Kyleth prepared for the next critical teaching. Now I must explain the relationship between physical brain and dimensional consciousness. This is where most confusion arises. The temple dissolved, replaced by a visual representation Sarah recognized, a human brain, but overlaid with fields of light extending far beyond the physical skull. Your neuroscience has mapped the brain extensively. You understand that different regions control different functions. You've identified neural correlates of consciousness, specific brain patterns associated with specific conscious states. And from this, your science has concluded that brain generates consciousness. This is incorrect but understandable error. The accurate model is this: brain is not the generator of consciousness but the interface between non-physical consciousness and physical reality. Like a radio doesn't create music but receives and translates radio waves into sound, your brain doesn't create consciousness but receives and translates dimensional consciousness into physical experience. When you sleep and consciousness travels dimensionally, brain wave patterns change because the relationship between consciousness and brain changes. During waking, consciousness is fully interfaced with physical brain. During light sleep, connection loosens. During deep sleep, consciousness is almost entirely separated, just thin connection maintained to ensure return to physical body. This is why damaging the brain affects consciousness function without eliminating consciousness itself. Damage the radio and sound quality deteriorates, but the radio waves still exist independently. Damage the brain and consciousness expression becomes impaired, but consciousness itself remains intact and continues existing beyond physical substrate. And this is why death, physical death, is not ending of consciousness but release from physical limitation. Brain ceases functioning, but consciousness simply transitions fully to dimensional existence. What you currently experience during sleep becomes your permanent state. No more cycling between physical and dimensional. No more memory suppression. Full awareness of your multidimensional nature. Sarah processed this with mixture of scientific skepticism and experimental confirmation. Everything Kyleth described matched her direct experience here. She was conscious, aware, learning, experiencing, all without physical brain activity in the usual sense. Her brain was back in bed, generating delta waves, while her consciousness was here in the fifth frequency learning temple. So what happens to people who die without any conscious awareness of dimensional reality? People who believed consciousness ended at death. They are confused initially. They expect non-existence and instead find themselves still conscious, still themselves, but without physical body. Most adapt quickly once they realize they're not alone. Deceased loved ones guide them. Dimensional guardians assist transition. They learn what they would have learned gradually during sleep if memory suppression hadn't prevented it. Death becomes crash course in dimensional reality. But transitions are easier for those who developed conscious awareness during life. Those who practiced dimensional navigation during sleep understand what's happening when physical death occurs. They transition smoothly, consciously choosing their next stage of development rather than being guided unconsciously. This is why spiritual traditions have always emphasized consciousness development during life. Not because God rewards piety or punishes sin, but because conscious evolution during physical existence prepares you for conscious navigation afterward. You're learning skills now that serve you eternally. Sarah felt her sleep time approaching its end. That subtle pull back toward physical reality, like an elastic cord beginning to retract. I'm going to wake up soon, aren't I? Yes. Your body's sleep cycle is concluding. Approximately 5 more minutes of dimensional time before consciousness returns to physical interface. Use these minutes wisely. What questions remain? How do I teach this? Specifically, what practices should I guide people through? Kyleth responded with clear instruction. Begin with the foundation. Teach people to value sleep as sacred practice, not inconvenient biological necessity. Modern culture treats sleep as wasted time, something to minimize. This attitude must reverse. Sleep is your nightly spiritual practice, your classroom in cosmic university, your direct connection to dimensional reality. Practical protocol to share. First, establish consistent sleep schedule. Body's circadian rhythm aligns with dimensional access timing. Irregular sleep creates static in the interface. Go to bed same time, wake same time, every day including weekends. This creates stable platform for conscious practice. Second, create sleep sanctuary. Sleep environment matters. Complete darkness supports pineal gland activation. Cool temperature allows body to enter deeper sleep states. Remove electronic devices. Electromagnetic fields interfere with dimensional navigation. Dedicate sleeping space to sleep and intimacy only, not work or entertainment. You're creating a launch pad for consciousness. Treat it with appropriate care. Third, bedtime preparation ritual. Before sleep, spend 10 minutes in quiet reflection. Review day with gratitude. Release tensions and unresolved emotions. State clear intention for night's dimensional travel. This might be general, I intend to remember where I travel tonight, or specific, I intend to visit the learning temple and download knowledge relevant to my work. Intention programs consciousness for the journey ahead. Fourth, practice the transition. As falling asleep, maintain gentle awareness. Don't force it. Force creates tension that prevents sleep. But don't completely surrender either. Find the balance point. Imagine floating or climbing or rising while body relaxes into stillness. With practice, you'll feel the separation moment. Consciousness lifting from physical form. First time is unmistakable. Once you experience it consciously even once, subsequent attempts become easier because you know what you're aiming for. Fifth, morning recall practice. Upon waking, don't move immediately. Lie still with eyes closed. Scan memory for fragments of dimensional experience. They'll often be right at surface of awareness but fade within seconds if you don't capture them. Keep journal beside bed. Immediately write whatever you remember, no matter how fragmentary. Over time, recall improves dramatically. Memory bridges strengthen. And most importantly, patience. This is skill development like any other. Learning to play piano takes time. Learning to speak a new language takes time. Learning conscious dimensional navigation takes time. Students become frustrated wanting immediate results. But consciousness responds to consistent practice over months and years, not desperate effort over days. Sarah absorbed the protocol, already translating it into research framework. What about people who insist this is all just brain activity? That there's nothing actually dimensional about it? How do I respond to materialist skepticism? Don't argue. Argumentation entrenches positions. Instead, invite experimentation. Say, I understand your skepticism. I shared it. But I'm offering a series of practices. Try them for 90 days and evaluate results based on your own experience. If nothing changes, no harm done. But if you begin accessing knowledge you couldn't have obtained through normal means, if you start having experiences that challenge materialist assumptions, then perhaps reconsider your framework. Science progresses through experimentation, not through defending existing paradigms. Real scientists experiment first, their eyes second. Invite them to experiment. Let direct experience speak for itself. And for those who do begin experiencing conscious dimensional travel, create community. This is crucial. Individual practice is important, but community support accelerates progress. People sharing experiences, comparing notes, encouraging each other through difficulties. Form local groups, online forums, annual gatherings. Create the support structure that helps people integrate dimensional awareness into physical life without becoming ungrounded. Because that's the real challenge, not achieving conscious dimensional travel, but integrating it into healthy, balanced life. Some people access higher frequencies and become so enamored with dimensional reality they want to abandon physical existence. This is error. You're incarnated physically for a reason. The goal isn't to escape physical reality but to bridge physical and dimensional, living consciously in both. The pull toward physical reality intensified. Sarah felt her consciousness beginning to compress, preparing for return journey. Before you go, final teaching. What I've shared tonight is beginning, not completion. Learning temples are just one dimension of sleep's purpose. As your practice develops, you'll discover service frequencies where consciousness actively participates in healing and balancing Earth's energy fields. You'll access timeline navigation frequencies where you can perceive probable futures and make wiser choices. You'll eventually reach communion frequencies where you directly experience unity with source consciousness. But all of this unfolds gradually through committed practice. Don't try to force the journey. Trust your consciousness knows the appropriate pace. Show up consistently night after night. Maintain intention. Record experiences. Share with others. And gradually, dimensional awareness becomes as natural as physical awareness. You live simultaneously in both realities consciously. Now return. Remember what you learned. Begin teaching. And know that you're not alone. Thousands of humans globally are receiving similar contact. The collective awakening is accelerating. In 20 years, conscious dimensional travel during sleep will be as normal as meditation. Humanity is reclaiming its multidimensional nature. Sarah felt the full force of return now. Her consciousness compressed into a single point, then suddenly snapped back into physical form like elastic released. She opened her eyes. Her bedroom. 5:47 a.m. according to the bedside clock. Michael still asleep beside her. Luna lifting her head briefly, then settling back to sleep. Everything perfectly normal. Perfectly physical. Except Sarah was different. She remembered. Not vague dream fragments but clear sequential experience. The transition station. Kyleth. The learning temple. The genetic information downloaded from the crystal. All of it crisp and detailed like waking memory. She lay still, following the morning protocol Kyleth had taught. Scanned the experience. Felt for any fading details. Committed it all to memory before moving. Then slowly sat up. Reached for the journal she now kept beside the bed. Wrote furiously for 20 minutes. Every detail. Every concept. The entire conversation and teaching session. Her hand cramping by the end but needing to capture it all while fresh. Michael stirred. You're up early. Bad dreams. Not bad. Just vivid. I needed to write it down before I forgot. You and your dream journal. You've been obsessed with that lately. It's research. Sleep research. Not quite a lie. This was sleep research, just from entirely different angle than her university position. The next days, Sarah began experimental verification. She took the genetic information she'd downloaded from the crystal and began comparing it with current genetic research. Most of it was indeed far beyond current knowledge. But she found fragments, theoretical papers exploring similar concepts, though nowhere near the comprehensive understanding she'd received. She designed a research proposal incorporating some of the less advanced techniques from the download, submitted it to her department head, received approval to proceed. 3 weeks later, first experimental results came back. The technique worked, better than anything in current literature. Her colleagues were impressed. "Sarah, this is breakthrough work. Where did you get this approach?" "I had an intuition. Followed it. Turned out to be correct." But she knew exactly where it came from. The fifth frequency learning temple. Information downloaded during conscious dimensional travel during sleep, and now being verified in physical laboratory. This became her pattern. Each night, attempting conscious transition. Not always successful. Some nights she fell asleep normally, waking with no dimensional memory. But success rate gradually increased. 1 night per week. Then 2 nights. Then 3. Building consistency through practice exactly as Kyleth had predicted. And each time she maintained conscious awareness through the sleep transition, she learned something new. Visited different temples. Downloaded different information. Met other human consciousnesses who were also remembering their nightly journeys. She met Marcus, an architect from Brazil, who was accessing architectural knowledge from the temple and designing buildings that seemed impossibly innovative. She met Yuki, a musician from Japan, downloading compositions from the music temple. She met Ahmed, an educator from Egypt, learning teaching methods that worked far better than conventional pedagogy. A network was forming. Humans globally who were remembering, comparing experiences, confirming that they were visiting the same dimensional spaces, meeting the same beings, accessing the same information. Sarah began teaching carefully. First to colleagues she trusted. A private seminar on consciousness during sleep, where she shared the protocols without initially mentioning the dimensional framework. Just practical techniques, consistent sleep schedule, bedtime intention, transition awareness, morning recall. Several participants began reporting unusual experiences. Vivid memories from sleep. Knowledge appearing in consciousness with no clear source. One researcher, Dr. James Peterson, approached Sarah privately. "Something is happening that I can't explain through conventional neuroscience. I'm remembering experiences from sleep that feel qualitatively different from dreams. And I'm accessing information I didn't know I knew. What exactly are you teaching us?" Sarah decided to trust him with the full framework. Explained the dimensional model, the learning temples, the conscious navigation protocol. Shared her own experiences. James listened without interruption. Then said, "I should dismiss this as impossible. But I've been experiencing it myself. I thought I was losing my mind. But if you're experiencing the same thing, if there's a coherent framework that explains it, can you teach me more? Can you guide me through the process consciously?" That became Sarah's method. Teach the practical protocols first. Let people experience dimensional reality directly. Then provide the framework to understand what they're experiencing. Experimental confirmation before theoretical explanation. 6 months after her initial contact with Kyleth, Sarah's private teaching network had grown to 4 to 7 individuals across 12 countries. All reporting consistent experiences. All accessing knowledge that verified in physical reality. All confirming the basic framework. Sleep is dimensional travel. Consciousness is non-local. Learning temples exist in 5th frequency. But Sarah also began noticing a pattern that concerned her. Some students became obsessed with dimensional access to the point of neglecting physical responsibilities. One student, brilliant programmer named David, started sleeping 10 hours per night, then 12, then 14. Spending more time dimensional than physical. His work suffered. His relationships deteriorated. He became increasingly disconnected from physical reality. Sarah confronted him. "David, You're violating the balance protocol. Dimensional knowledge should enhance physical life, not replace it. But physical life seems meaningless now. I can access infinite knowledge during sleep. Why waste time with mundane physical tasks? Because you incarnated physically for a reason. You're meant to bridge dimensional and physical, not abandon one for the other. If dimensional reality was sufficient, you wouldn't have taken physical form at all. Your purpose is integration, not escape. David struggled with this but eventually found balance. Reduced sleep to healthy 8 hours. Focused dimensional time on downloading specific knowledge for his work projects. Used dimensional insights to enhance physical creativity rather than avoiding physical reality. The incident prompted Sarah to refine her teaching. She developed a more comprehensive protocol addressing the integration challenge. Protocol for balanced dimensional practice. First, establish that physical life comes first. Sleep should never exceed 9 hours. Your primary responsibilities, work, relationships, health, community, must remain priorities. Dimensional practice enhances these, doesn't replace them. Second, set specific intentions for dimensional learning aligned with physical purpose. Don't just wander aimlessly through dimensional frequencies. Identify specific knowledge that will help you serve better in physical reality. Download that. Apply it. Then seek more. Third, maintain grounding practices. Regular physical exercise. Time in nature. Face-to-face human connection. Healthy eating. These anchor consciousness in physical embodiment and prevent unhealthy detachment. Fourth, work with integration practices. Upon waking from conscious dimensional travel, ask, how does this knowledge apply to my physical life? What specific actions should I take based on what I learned? Integration transforms dimensional experience into physical wisdom. Fifth, find the middle way. Too much focus on physical reality creates spiritual emptiness. Too much focus on dimensional reality creates physical dysfunction. The goal is conscious presence in both simultaneously. Dimensional awareness informing physical choices. Physical experiences deepening dimensional understanding. Sarah continued her own practice diligently. Most nights now, she maintained conscious awareness through sleep transition. She had become proficient at navigating to different frequency levels. The learning temples were familiar territory, but she had also begun accessing higher frequencies. Sixth frequency collective consciousness pools were profoundly moving. Merging temporarily with the collective awareness of all humans, experiencing the species as a single organism. Feeling the pain and joy of billions simultaneously. Understanding that individual and collective are not separate but interdependent aspects of single reality. Seventh frequency timeline access was disorienting initially. Perceiving multiple probable futures simultaneously. Understanding that each choice branched into different timeline. Learning to navigate toward optimal timelines through conscious decision-making in physical life. And once, just once so far, she had accessed 8th frequency service level. Found herself participating in healing work alongside other advanced consciousnesses. They were working on Earth's energy grids, balancing distortions created by human activity. Pouring healing frequency into areas of concentrated suffering, war zones, poverty-stricken regions, environmentally devastated landscapes. Sarah woke from that experience exhausted but fulfilled, understanding that sleep wasn't just about personal learning but collective service. Advanced consciousness uses sleep time to actively help maintain planetary balance. She shared this experience with her teaching network. Several advanced students reported similar experiences. They compared notes, finding remarkable consistency. They were visiting the same service frequencies, working on the same planetary healing projects, meeting the same guide beings. This confirmed for Sarah that this was real. Not individual hallucination. Not brain-generated fantasy. Real dimensional reality with independent existence verified through multiple witnesses. 14 months after her initial contact, Kyleth appeared again during Sarah's sleep travel. But this time in the transition station, waiting specifically for her. Sarah Chen. You have progressed well. Your teaching network is expanding appropriately. But I must share information about timing. About why memory suppression protocols are being removed now and what this means for humanity's immediate future. Sarah sensed seriousness in Kyletha's presence. What is it? Humanity is approaching a critical evolutionary threshold. In the next 20 years, your species will either transcend to multidimensional consciousness and join the Galactic Federation as conscious participant, or you will fail to transcend and face slow extinction through environmental collapse and social fragmentation. 20 years? That's very specific. Precise calculation based on multiple factors. Environmental tipping points. Technological acceleration. Collective consciousness development. All trajectories converge in approximately 20 years. That's when the window closes. Either humanity has achieved sufficient conscious awareness to navigate the transition, or the opportunity is lost for this evolutionary cycle. And removing memory suppression, this is to help us make the transition. Yes, conscious dimensional awareness is required for transcendence. A species that believes consciousness is brain-generated and death is extinction cannot evolve beyond physical limitation. You must remember you are multidimensional beings temporarily focused in physical form. You must reclaim conscious relationship with dimensional reality. You must learn to navigate sleep consciously. But why such a narrow window? Why can't evolution happen gradually over centuries? Because environmental collapse is accelerating. Your species has destabilized planetary systems to the point where physical extinction becomes probable within 60 years unless dramatic course correction occurs. That course correction requires consciousness shift that only dimensional awareness can provide. Humans operating from purely physical consciousness created the environmental crisis through short-term thinking. More resources, more consumption, more growth. This perspective seemed rational from three-dimensional viewpoint. But from dimensional perspective, it's clearly suicidal, destroying the physical environment that supports physical incarnation. Only when humans remember they are eternal consciousness temporarily embodied can they shift priorities. Only when they access higher frequency wisdom during sleep can they develop sustainable relationship with Earth. Only when they understand that physical reality is sacred classroom for consciousness development, not resource to be exploited, can they change course. And this must happen within 20 years because environmental tipping points beyond that become irreversible with third-dimensional technology. Once certain thresholds pass, ice sheet collapse, ocean acidification, biosphere die-off, physical technology cannot reverse them. Only dimensional intervention could restore balance, but that would violate free will protocols. Sarah absorbed the urgency. So teaching people conscious dimensional navigation during sleep is literally about survival? About humanity's continued existence. Yes, though not survival of physical bodies. Consciousness is eternal. You cannot truly die. But survival of human civilization, human culture, human opportunity for collective evolution. If physical extinction occurs, all consciousness currently incarnated as human will continue existing dimensionally. But the collective experience of being human, the cultural achievements, the relational complexity, all lost. And more importantly, the evolutionary opportunity is lost. You incarnated specifically to participate in this transition, to be part of species transcending from third to multidimensional awareness. If transition fails, you miss that opportunity for this cycle. Your consciousness continues, but not in the way you intended when you chose human incarnation. This hit Sarah powerfully. So everyone alive now chose to be here for this specific evolutionary moment. Yes, no accidents. Every consciousness currently incarnated as human selected this time period specifically to participate in the transition. Some consciously know this. Most don't consciously remember but feel it as an inexplicable sense of purpose, feeling that they're here for something important even if they don't know what. And those who are awakening first, like you, like your students, are the intended teachers. Your consciousness signed up to remember early, to develop the practices, to teach others. You're the ones who bridge from collective unconscious sleep to collective conscious dimensional awareness. How many need to awaken? What's the threshold? Critical mass is approximately 3% of human population. 240 million people maintaining regular conscious dimensional navigation during sleep. That creates morphic resonance strong enough to facilitate awakening in the remaining 97%. Consciousness is contagious. Once enough people remember, the collective field shifts and everyone begins remembering more easily. Currently, approximately 50 million humans worldwide have spontaneous dimensional memories. Your teachings and others like you globally are expanding that number. Growth is exponential. 50 million becomes 100 million within 5 years if current trajectory continues. 100 million becomes 200 million within 10 years. Critical mass reached within 15 years, with 5 years remaining to integrate and stabilize before the window closes. But this assumes the teaching continues accelerating. It assumes those who remember teach others. It assumes the inevitable resistance and ridicule from materialist establishment doesn't suppress the awakening. Sarah understood the responsibility settling on her shoulders. So what do you need from me specifically? Continue teaching, but expand reach. Your current network is 4 to 7 individuals. In the next year, that should grow to 500. In 5 years, 50,000. You personally cannot teach that many, but your students can teach others. Create cascading network of teachers. Establish training protocols so your students become teachers who train their students to become teachers. And document everything. Write books. Create videos. Develop online courses. Make the knowledge accessible to anyone genuinely seeking. Some will ridicule. Many will dismiss. But those whose consciousness is ready will recognize truth and practice. Those are the ones who matter. And most importantly, remain grounded. You face the same temptation as David, becoming so enamored with dimensional reality that you neglect physical service. But your purpose is integration. Bridging physical and dimensional. Teaching others to live consciously in both. Don't abandon physical reality. Transform it through dimensional wisdom. Sarah woke from that encounter with crystal clarity about her path forward. Over the next months, she made significant changes. She resigned from her university position. They wanted her to continue studying sleep from purely neurological perspective, and she could no longer limit herself that way. She established independent institute dedicated to consciousness research and dimensional navigation training. Initial funding came from students and supporters who had experienced the reality of conscious dimensional travel themselves. She wrote a book, Sleep as Sacred Practice, Reclaiming Your Nightly Journey to Dimensional Reality. Published it independently when mainstream publishers rejected it as too fringe. It sold 500 copies the first month. Then 5,000. Then 50,000 as word spread through networks of seekers and practitioners. She developed online training program, comprehensive 8-week course teaching the complete protocol for conscious dimensional navigation during sleep. First cohort had 30 students. Second cohort had 300. Third cohort had 3,000. Within 2 years of her initial contact with Kyleth, Sarah's network had grown to 8,000 active practitioners across 47 countries. All reporting consistent experiences. All verifying the dimensional framework through their own direct experience. All teaching others. The resistance she encountered was substantial. Former colleagues dismissed her as having experienced mental breakdown. Skeptical bloggers accused her of running a cult. Mainstream media mocked the premise that consciousness travels to other dimensions during sleep. But none of that mattered to those who practiced and experienced it themselves. You can't argue someone out of their direct experience. Once you've consciously traveled to learning temples during sleep and downloaded knowledge that verifies in physical reality, no amount of skeptical criticism can convince you it wasn't real. Sarah continued her own practice diligently. Nearly every night now, she maintained conscious awareness through sleep transition. She had become skilled navigator of dimensional frequencies. Learning temples, collective consciousness pools, timeline navigation, service frequencies, all familiar territory. And she had begun accessing even higher frequencies that Kyleth hadn't initially described. Ninth frequency where consciousness could directly perceive the underlying geometric patterns that generate physical reality. 10th frequency, where she participated in councils with highly advanced beings guiding human evolution. And once, just once, she had touched 11th frequency, direct communion with source consciousness, the fundamental awareness from which all existence emerges. That experience was beyond words, beyond description, a moment of absolute unity, perfect love, total understanding. Recognition that she was not small limited being but infinite consciousness temporarily wearing human form for purposes of growth and service. The experience lasted perhaps 3 seconds of dimensional time but transformed her completely. She woke from that communion knowing with absolute certainty that everything Kyleth had taught was true. Sleep is sacred practice. Consciousness is eternal. Physical life is temporary schooling in the eternal education of awareness. And she knew her purpose with crystalline clarity. Teach as many humans as possible to reclaim conscious relationship with dimensional reality during sleep. Help humanity remember its multidimensional nature. Contribute to reaching critical mass before the 20-year window closes. 3 years after initial contact, Sarah's network had grown to 127,000 practitioners. Her book had sold 890,000 copies globally. Her online training had graduated 23,000 students. And those students were teaching others, creating cascading effect exactly as Kyleth had predicted. The collective awakening was accelerating. More people reporting spontaneous dimensional memories. More researchers finding courage to investigate consciousness beyond materialist framework. More teachers emerging to guide others through the transition. The resistance remained strong. Established institutions defending materialist paradigm. But the tide was shifting. Too many people experiencing dimensional reality directly for the old framework to hold. And for you listening to this now, you face a choice. You can dismiss this as interesting story, entertaining fiction, but ultimately irrelevant to your life. Or you can experiment. You can practice the protocols. You can discover through your own direct experience whether sleep truly is dimensional travel to other realms of reality. The protocols are simple. Establish consistent sleep schedule. Create sleep sanctuary. Practice bedtime intention setting. Maintain gentle awareness during sleep transition. Keep morning dream journal. Be patient with yourself as skills develop. Try it for 90 days. Commit to the practice without expectation but with sincere intention. See what happens. See if you begin remembering where you travel during sleep. See if you start accessing knowledge you couldn't have obtained through normal means. See if the dimensional framework begins making sense through direct experience. And if you do begin experiencing conscious dimensional travel during sleep, don't keep it to yourself. Share with others. Teach them. Help expand the awakening. Because we need 240 million humans consciously navigating dimensional reality during sleep to reach critical mass. We need you. You chose to be here for this evolutionary transition. Your consciousness selected this specific time period to incarnate. Deep within you, beyond conscious memory, you know this. You sense that something important is happening. That you're here for a reason. This is the reason. Reclaiming humanity's multidimensional nature. Bridging physical and dimensional reality. Evolving from unconscious sleep to conscious navigation. Participating in the collective awakening that determines whether humanity transcends or collapses. The window is 20 years. The requirement is 3%. The practice is nightly. The choice is yours. Remember, you are not the limited physical being you appear to be. You are infinite consciousness temporarily focused in physical form. You are multidimensional being experiencing human life as part of eternal education in awareness. You travel to other dimensions every single night during sleep. The only question is, will you remember? Will you reclaim conscious awareness of your nightly journeys? Will you access the learning, healing, and service available in dimensional frequencies? Will you become part of critical mass that helps humanity transcend? The invitation stands. The protocols are available. The teachers are ready. The dimensional realms await your conscious return. Sleep is not rest. Sleep is journey. Sleep is sacred practice. Sleep is your nightly opportunity to remember who you truly are. What will you choose?